Let's talk about URL mapping. The URL map feature on .cms content types is an easy way to automatically create friendly URLs for search engine optimization, or SEO. When we set up URL mapping for a content type, each individual item of that content type can be viewed from the front end of our site as if it had its own separate page on the site, without us actually having to create that page. Now, this will also allow us to create a single page, which will show up as if it was literally thousands of separate pages, if we wish. And finally, we can provide URLs that help with our search engine optimization, or SEO, by incorporating information about the content that we're using in the URL. Now, to get started, I'm here in my content model and content types. And the content type we'll be setting up URL mapping for is our activity content type. If I click on activity, there are a few things that I need to set up within the content type to make sure that URL mapping is ready to go. Let's start by going to the top right and clicking Edit. Here, I'll scroll to the bottom of the Edit Content fields, and I'll see that we have two fields in particular that are very important. One of those is the detail page, and one is the URL pattern. Now, first and foremost, the URL pattern is extremely important in setting up our URL maps. The URL pattern essentially tells our site what the URL should be for each one of these content items. They're all going to follow the same pattern, thus URL pattern. And we can build that pattern using the fields of our content type as variables. You'll notice that our URL pattern in this case is activities/URL title. And the URL title is in curly braces. That means it's a variable. That variable is going to pull the appropriate URL title from that field for each content item. Now, I could have multiple different variables listed here, and they would be displayed essentially like a folder hierarchy. So if I had fields for, say, categories of activities, I could have that listed here as well. And we could say category, and then URL title. Now, I don't have that field here, so I'm not going to use it in this case. But this is just an example to show you could have multiple variables in your URL pattern. I'm going to remove the category portion of this, and we're going to keep this nice and simple. Activities/URL title. Now, we want to ensure that this pattern will output a unique value. So, using a combination of variables that will make a unique value is very important. But one easy way to make sure that this is unique is to make sure that the contents of those fields is unique. So, the field we're using here is URL title. If I click cancel and take a look at my URL title field, I can click the pencil icon to edit it. And if I scroll down, I'll find here my unique checkbox. Now, this would obviously make this field unique, which can be helpful if we have a simple URL map pattern. But if our map pattern is more sophisticated and involves, say, multiple variables, then it's actually best practice not to set this as unique. That can sometimes cause issues. If our URL map does not output a unique value and we have duplicates, then the site doesn't necessarily know which one of those URLs to use, and it might display one or the other, which of course could be inappropriate. Now that we're here in the URL title field, there's a few more things that we want to take a look at. For one, if we didn't already have a URL title field, we would need to create one. And we would do this by dragging a custom field from the right into our fields on the content type. Then I could just give this a title, like URL title, and then provide the value. Now, I already have a URL title field, so I'm going to click cancel. I'm going to go back to my URL title field, And we can see that there is a string of code here in the value for this field. Now this line of code is essentially pulling this value for us. But the good thing is we don't need to fully understand exactly what this means quite yet. We can wait until the web dev course for that. But we do still need to use this if we want URL mapping to work. Now there's only a few more things we have to do to set this up. If I scroll to the bottom, there's a few things we want to check. For one, required. We want to make sure that this always has the field populated. 2 is system indexed. This field needs to be indexed by the system for the system to be able to parse it and use it. So that needs to be checked as well. And finally, like I mentioned before, unique. Checking this box will ensure that this URL will always be unique. Once all of that is set, we can just click save and we have our URL title field. Now, going back to edit in the top right, there was another field here, our detail page. Now, the detail page is essentially where our site will display that content item in place of an actual page for it. All of our content items will be displayed on the detail page individually, as though it was its own page. So first we need to actually have a detail page. I have already created one. Once again, I'll click cancel. I'll show you by going to Site Browser. And here I've placed it under Activities. Obviously, where you place this page will depend entirely upon what it is that you're looking at for the content type. In this case, I'm looking at Activities. We have a folder for Activities. So I went ahead and created this page in that folder. I gave it a unique name like Activity Detail Page. That way we easily know what this page is for. I can go on back to my content types in Content Model, go to Activity, and here I can ensure in the Edit section that this detail page is set appropriately. We want to make sure we're pointing to the right page. Then .cms will know, 1, what the URL should be displayed as, and 2, what page to display that content item on. Now that we've set both of these, our URL mapping should work appropriately. Now, there are a few other things that we could do with our detail page. For instance, we could have a selectable list of links to all of the different content items that fit that content type. That's a little bit more advanced. We'll talk about that more in the web dev course. But for now, just to show you what this actually looks like, I'll give you a demonstration. Of course, we would need to make sure that we actually have content that matches this. But the good thing is, of course, we do in our activity. So if I go to my site browser, I can go ahead and open my activity detail page. This is exactly what that detail page looks like for all of our activities, and it is essentially displaying all of them at once. But like I mentioned before, it will actually pull each individual activity. I have my front end of the site pulled up here in another window. And if I scroll down, I can see my list of activities here, just like we saw during the initial demonstration. If I click on any one of these, we're not seeing a page that was built just for this activity. Instead, we're seeing the detail page, but it's been coded so that it displays exactly what we want people to see when they click on it. And if you recall what our URL map was, if we look at the URL on the top, it says activities/surfing. And surfing, believe it or not, is the URL title of this activity. The rest of the content we see on the page here is determined by a VTL file. If I go back to my back end, we can take a look at our browser, and I'll show you exactly where this lives. I have it in my application folder, and then VTL, activities. Here I have activities-detail.vtl. I can right click on this and preview it to show you exactly what this looks like. Again, this is the kind of thing we'll talk a bit more about in the web dev course, but once we have prepared our VTL and styled that page the way that we want to see it, all we do is save it somewhere, point to that VTL file, and ensure that that's what the page is looking at. Now, how do we actually set that up? Well, if I go to my activities folder and open my activity detail page, I can edit this. You'll notice all of this is one item. We can tell by the shaded blue area. This is a VTL file content type. So we could simply drag in that VTL file content type, drop it, and provide our VTL. I can edit it like this, and we can point to that VTL file exactly where it lives, and look at that, activities-detail.vtl. Again, we'll get into the VTL files and how this works in the web dev course. For now, just understand exactly how this works and how helpful it could be for you when you set up your site.